how do you know what to hire for around you? It's one of my favorite interview questions to ask. When I interview people, I say, what are the first 2 hires you would make to complement you? Because then you find out what people believe are their weaknesses and how they would think about designing a team to support them. I think about that when I hire too, right? Like I make sure that I'm hiring people that fill in my gaps. And that means that I'm going to hire someone who is fundamentally different than me in terms of their intuition and their capabilities.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi Skutvik. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today's guest is someone who spends her time rethinking how organizations actually work, not just how we say they work. Kit Krugman is the Senior Vice President of People and Culture at Foursquare. She's leading some bold programs in how companies design teams, performance systems, and leadership structures to move faster and work smarter. Before joining Foursquare, Kit was a partner and managing director at Co-Collective, where she built and led the firm's organization and culture design practice, advising global companies like IBM, Microsoft, and LinkedIn on how to align strategy, culture, and leadership for real impact. She holds a master's degree in organizational psychology and change leadership from Columbia University and a bachelor's degree from Yale University. And she spent her career helping leaders think differently about power, performance, and the systems that shape how people work together. What makes Kit's perspective especially interesting is that she doesn't see culture as a buzzword or branding exercise. She sees organizations as systems that can be intentionally designed. She's a systems thinker, a creative problem solver, and someone who's deeply interested in the intersection of human behavior, leadership, and organizational design, connecting the dots between people, strategy, structure, and story. So let's jump in. All right, Kit, well, thank you for being here. Thank you for agreeing to spend an hour with me. I know time is precious. And so I just really am grateful that you said yes. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here and have really enjoyed our conversations to date. So looking forward to this one.
Awesome. Well, as I do, I like to start out with just kind of grounding the conversation and understanding your definition or your maybe not understanding, but like how you would describe a vibe in the workplace, right? And you and I, during our first conversation, actually said, and I did a LinkedIn post about this recently, is vibe too casual? Is it too how do you get executives to get excited about the word? Does it feel too playful? So I would love to hear your definition because we'll continue to talk about this, but also how we get the same definition across with maybe not being as playful.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been doing culture and cultural transformation work for so long now that I feel like the first frontier here was helping people understand that culture is not an amorphous thing. It's a deeply designable and systems-based concept, that it's the set of behaviors repeated and rewarded in your organization. And I feel like the concept of vibe, both my objection to it and my enthusiasm about it.
Well, you agreed to this and it's called Vibecast. So
Yeah,
both can be true.
both can be true. And I think it's because it's the same thing, right? Which is it's often a word that is put in to kind of it's hard to define it, right? The vibe felt this way, the vibe felt off, or there were good vibes, and I can't quite pin it down. But when you actually look at the definition of vibes, it's very clear. It's the emotional tone. And the emotional tone is comprised of a set of things that are inclusive of body language, energy, like the way that people are in relationship with each other and communicating. And there's so many different ways to communicate. I talk to my husband about this all the time. There's so many different ways that you're communicating.
Totally. Yeah. Even with kids, right? As kids grow up, if you think about like your own internal house as like your own organization and you and your husband leading it, it's like how you speak to them, the behaviors that you show up with, how you walk through the door, what you say, it all matters.
Yeah, 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 and so I think that when you take a concept like that and you use it as an opportunity to ground in what is the science behind this? What is the system behind this that is designable, that is controllable? And how do you look at it as the aggregated set of energy and emotional, signaling and communication that people are putting into a shared space, whether that's virtual or physical, right? Then it becomes powerful, and I think that's, like, the tension for me in my why I say, like, objection to it as a, like, soft concept and enthusiasm about it as a thing to define and discuss.
Yeah. I like that you said signaling, right? Because we're always signaling no matter what we're doing. Even if we're driving in our car and we're turning our blinker on, we're signaling something. And so I want to like hang on to that as we continue to talk because I think it's signaling happens whether you are intentional about it or not. So then like how do you make sure that your signaling is intentional in the right manner to make sure that you're creating the energy within an organization, like you said, virtual or in person, that you want to, and that's aligned with, like, how you wanna show up in the marketplace, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot about power. I mean, I've done a lot of talking and thinking about power and power in the workplace, and signaling is often done by people in power, right? Like, going back to the word tone, you when you are in power, when you're holding power, the every micro action you take is an act of signaling, whether or not you are aware of it or not, right? And you are also tone setting. You walk into a conversation, you set the tone by how you engage with the people around the table. You make them feel comfortable. You make them feel uncomfortable. You make them feel like we're moving quickly. You make them feel like we have time to relax. Like one of, my former bosses, Ty Montague, who was the CEO, co-CEO over at Co-Collective, said to me once that great leaders control space and time. And I think that has always stuck with me about how you bridge tone and time, right?
Yeah, yeah. So then it's like, okay, how do you like, if I'm getting really deep for a second, but, like, the core of your character is defined, like, from the time that you're born, right? And, like, your experiences shape who you are and how you show up. So H how do you make sure that you are showing up to be a great leader, to be to do amazing things, to create the right environment and vibe within the team, like, that's a lot there. Or actually, like, hiring the right people. I think you and I talked about this, hiring the right people from the get that are diverse in thinking, but aligned in values, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's pick off one question at a time. I think starting with the first one, which is I really believe that the act of leadership is a continuous process of self-awareness, and self-improvement, frankly, because you are as you gain power in an organization or in a system, you need to be increasingly aware of your impact on others. And from a business perspective, not just from, like, how do you make people feel, but are you the kind of person where all of a sudden you walk into a room and things happen faster, results drive faster? Like, if that's the kind of the vibes or the tone that you set, then you need to be aware of that for better or for worse. And so I think that if you are not a leader that's not doing a lot of self-reflection, like, how did people react to me? How did I influence the work that is being done? Then there's still the work to be done, is what I would say.
Sure. Yeah. Now, that's great perspective because I'm sure you have stories, and I do too, of leaders who are like, that's just the way I am. Tough.
Yeah, and that there's value in that too. I wouldn't I think that being honest about who you are as a leader and as an individual and what you are willing to work on is far better than a disconnect between, saying, "Oh, I'm really open to feedback," and then when people bring you feedback, you're not
Right.
actually. So,
Right. Because that's setting a tone too, right? Like it's your impact, like your intention is great, but your impact is terrible because now you're a hypocrite. or you're you're just dishonest, right? And so then it just breeds this dishonesty. They say one thing, they do another, like, forget about it.
Yeah, and that's why self-knowledge is so important, right? If you know there's certain things that aren't gonna change, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I love getting up on stage, I love talking, I'm here. Um, and so pretending that I don't love to do that or, that I won't take up space in a room, is dishonest, it's intellectually. However, being aware of that can help me remember to create space for others to step up and in too, right?
Totally, totally, right. Or using that space and platform to bring others in, right? So that because you can be that voice, so you can bring others in who might not be as comfortable with that.
Exactly, like choosing how you leverage your authority and how you, use it to drive forward the results that you are trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I talk me through kind of your journey to some degree or some stories of like how you got to this place where this became important to you. Has there been like some defining moments in your life where you're like, this is where I want a good majority of my focus to be, or the impact I want to have on organizations, or right, like in your role to as you are today. But there's always a journey behind it, and so I'd love to hear some stories of like why this is important and why you do this as your life's work now.
Yeah. I think the central thread for me has always been about leadership, just coming back to what we were just talking about. I've always been deeply interested in leadership since I was a little girl. I have great leaders to look up to in my family. My dad's an amazing leader. My aunt's an incredible leader, among others. And the idea of taking on responsibility and using that responsibility wisely, using your power wisely to make things better and to solve problems has always appealed to me. And for better or for worse, sometimes I raise my hand for too many things, and that's like something I need to work on. uh, but I came to this work through that lens, truly, because when I started my career actually in advertising and marketing, and I was in an organization where I was working with executive leadership from a very early age. I joined a new business team actually as a designer, but I was in a room of executives who were focused on new business, and so I started watching and observing how leadership engaged, interacted, made decisions, and even from that age at that time, I think I was 22. I just wanted to be a part of the conversation, and at the time, I didn't have the humility to be shy, so
There's some bliss to that too.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what I will say? I went to an all-girls school, which I don't know if I've mentioned that on in other forums, but I went to an all-girls school, and there's a characteristic of other women I meet who've gone to all-girls schools, which is that there's a confidence of, owning your voice in a room and not feeling intimidated as by other folks, whether they're for instance, that room that I was in with those executives at the time was a full male leadership room, and I didn't feel scared to speak up, um, and that gave me opportunity. Frankly, it gave me opportunity at an early age.
Mhm. Do you remember growing up as a kid, like, the first time you recognized good leadership, whether it be in your family or with a coach like, what it was that you saw that was like, "I'm gonna remember that."
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about my dad. I mentioned him, when you asked about leadership and leadership inspiration. My dad, and it's so funny because there's so many parallels between parenting and leadership practice, especially in terms of emotional self-management, which I'm doing now with my young kids. My dad always treated me like I was a capable decision maker from a young age. Like, when I asked him a question, "What should I do?" He said, "I trust your judgment. What do you think you should do?" And that developed in me a strong, healthy sense of confidence in myself and in my judgment calls. That's not to say I didn't make mistakes. Let me and I've
Of
still
course, yeah, but mistakes are part of the process, right? I mean, even as we parent, even as we lead teams, like, you have to be comfortable in mistake those moments of mistakes too, right? So it's like there's learning in that as well.
Yeah, and coming back to, like, when you did make a mistake that you that you still have sound judgment, right? And that you're able to recognize a mistake, and I think that both as a leadership skill, I saw that and I saw how intentional he was with that, and that really inspired me and gave me confidence to lead later.
Sure, sure. Okay, how does that translate into leading your team?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about today. So today I lead the people team at Foursquare, and I came in here 2.5 years ago with the remit to really help make sure the people team was a driver of strategic transformation in the organization. We've been going through a lot of change, especially focused on amplifying velocity in the organization, and that has been a renovation project for the people team and for executives here. In terms of how I carry that through and how I lead, I I really believe that leaders have a responsibility to set a compelling and exciting vision. And so from the outset of coming into Foursquare, I talked to the people team about what I wanted us to be and what the people team thought about what we were today, right? So being able to articulate that delta, not in my words, like as a judgmental, hey, here's where you are, but rather in like, how do you see this organization that you're a part of, the people organization within the broader scope? And where do you think we could be? Where could we go if our goal is to drive this kind of impact and drive this kind of change? So that where that carries forward to me is to trust that the team knows and doesn't need to be told what kind of transformation um, they need to go on in order to drive more impact in the organization. And in recognizing that together, you might not know the way to get there, but then I can help realize that in partnership with a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's so great because transformation, sometimes you're talking about the vision only and not where you're at today. And, or you're just talking about like all the problems. And I think that it's important to talk about like, here's where we're at today. I'm sure there's intention why we're here. Or maybe there isn't. And that's part of the problem, right? But it's like, here's where we're at. And let's just be real about it and have like an outlook on it that says, okay, this is true and correct today. And this is where we want to go and here's how we're going to get there. Talking about a little bit about like your systems and processes that kind of stand behind creating the right energy and tone and signaling in an environment. I'm sure there's a lot kind of in between, but that is where like the intention can sit right within those things.
Yeah, and you need to work backwards from that vision and also be really open to how it could evolve along the way, right? There's a concept in yoga. I did yoga teacher training at some point, and this concept that really resonated with me called a parigraha, which is letting go of outcomes. And I think the thing about vision, especially in today's day and age where everything is changing, is you want to have something you're working towards, but you really today you cannot lay the path, right? You can move the component parts and see what changes in service of that vision and be not attached to the outcome of the way that got it too. And that helps and the team stay adaptable.
You know, that's interesting that you say that because I was having a conversation with my husband last night actually, and we were talking about kids sports. So, and my son is 13, he's in middle school, and we were talking about, um, I think people are I think in general, I'm speaking in generalities, right? But there's a population of youth, I will say, of all ages that don't dream big enough. And when it comes to vision, and this has just been my observation lately because I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary school kid. Um, and we talk probably because the line of work that like I'm in, and you'll probably have these same dinner time conversations, right? Is like we dream really big. We like talk about vision, talk about passion, talk through hard questions. We do conversation cards at the dinner table. When friends come over, we do it. Like my kids grab them, we do it. We have interesting conversations. But and now as they get older, we're starting to see, not to get into a parenting talk, but like seeing those big dreams show up in things like pushing through adversity and drowning out the noise of naysayers and like showing up in some ways that are really, really interesting. So when you talk about vision in an organization, it's like dreaming really big. And so what we've seen with some of the in youth sports is that and the conversation how it went is like, I think we're seeing some behaviors of kids who aren't pushed to dream big. And so they just settle for, like, whatever happens to them or not pushing hard enough or not setting their sights really high because they think it's possible, right? And so there's like this self-limiting behavior that shows up, and when it's in a team sport, it's really hard because if there's some kids who dream really big, again, you don't know if that outcome's gonna happen, they're still young, but, like, the journey to get there builds, like, kinda key skills, and I think the same is true for what you're sharing now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, listen, dreaming big is also a privilege, right? Like, and I think, so much of this, as we talked about before, is shaped by your inner narrative that tells you, like, what's possible for you, and so much of that is shaped by how you're spoken to and how people trust or do not trust you in your early developmental years too. So I think there's a lot of factors, right? Like, it's all systemic. There's a lot of factors in, like, is it that the limiting narratives are truly generated, like, organically, or are the limiting narratives instilled, or are the limiting narratives context, right? If you've never been exposed to the idea of something bigger or more impactful, or never been told that it's possible for you, and in fact been told the opposite, then how would you dare to dream, right?
Right, right. Well, and then kind of like teaching other kids to create like teaching our son to create to have those conversations with his peers that they can do these things or that like inspire them along the way so that we can change that conversation, right? And he can experience team members differently.
Yeah, and listen, like, humans are such the thing I always come back to, I love stories, I love novels, I love narratives, but humans are such narrative creatures, and so much of the way that we conceive of our own experiences through stories and through stories, and this is where, vision does become really powerful, a vision and a story of what's possible. Like, when I came into Foursquare, one of the things that I talked about in the first people team offsite that we did was I wanna build a case study. I want this to be a story that we can tell about a transformation that we underwent, and what do you need in order to do that? Okay, we need to measure what we're changing. We need to have a thing that we're anchoring in. Need to have a contribution. We need to think of it with this outcome in mind, and that's a story and a narrative, and you build those kind of
Right.
along the way.
Right. Right. So what so let's go back to my second question because I know I asked two questions and I tend to do this even at home. Um so how do you make sure that you because it all kind of starts with like who comes onto the team, right? Because that can create an energy too of like and a dynamic, that is can be very helpful or hurtful, I would say, right? And somewhere in between. It's not polarizing like that, but it can be. So how do you go about making sure that the right people join in order to move the business forward, set the tone, have the right signaling, all of those things while keeping kind of like an open and diverse way of thinking on the team, right? Yeah. Does my
Yeah.
question make sense?
Yeah, so what you're asking is how do you balance attracting the types of skill sets and, behaviors and capabilities that will work for you and the team and creating that energy and vibe that you want while maintaining diversity of thought and perspective that might create tension in some working ways, right? Okay. Um, so having done recruiting for a very long time as a like large portion of my career when I was coming up through that beginning journey, I think, to use another, like, softer word like vibe, in into people talk a lot about intuition in hiring, and the way that I articulate intuition, the kind of scientific side of intuition in hiring, is if you're really watching and observing people and the way that they behave, people are pretty consistent. Which means that the way that they show up in an interview process and the things that they wanna talk about or the, um, way that they engage with you, it it is pretty consistent, and so if you notice patterns in interviewing someone or getting to know them, those patterns will emerge later, and those are good patterns or bad patterns, and so I think you can really pay attention. We talked early um in the early part of this podcast about vibes. I think that if vibes are tone, body language, behavior, if you're paying attention to that, you will get a read on what types of behaviors to expect from that person in the future, right? And then I think it goes back to something else we talked about, which is self-knowledge and self-management, which is how do you know what to hire for around you? It's one of my favorite interview questions to ask, right? When I interview people, I say, "What are the first 2 hires you would make to complement you?" Because then you find out what people believe are their weaknesses and how they would think about designing a team to support them. I think about that when I hire too, right? Like I make sure that I'm hiring people that fill in my gaps. And that means that I'm going to hire someone who is fundamentally different than me in terms of their intuition, like their capabilities, because looking to like for instance, like I love here's a very concrete example. I am an idea person. I love to talk about ideas. Shocking. I actually love to like come up with disruptive ideas and believe that anything is possible. And so I can throw a lot of stuff at the team. And I'm never not thinking about like the new things we can do with like new technology and how we can redefine the function and get a big picture thinking. Um, so I need to, I mean, it's like a lot. And I needed someone as my right hand who had the intellectual horsepower to understand what I was saying and why I felt it was important and to execute it with excellence. And so I have an amazing team member. The minute I met her, I knew that we would be an incredible team because she is absolutely brilliant and we work so well together. Like she and I are back and forth constantly on ideas, and she makes so much happen in the organization in partnership. But again, like so you end up with someone who's different than you because you're looking for something different in order to build a great team.
Yeah. But to your point, it goes back to like being self aware and knowing where you like the gaps that need to be filled where you can't step in because it's not like your natural tendency. I am the same way. I am low detail, not because I want to be or because I'm too good for it, or just there are things I don't innately think about because I'm thinking up here and like what can be and how we can like problem solve that thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, but like operationalizing it and putting it into a project plan, I can do it. It just drains my energy and I'm gonna miss something, like, no doubt, right? And so but it is that self-awareness piece, and that's come over time, many assessments later to kind of tell me the same thing of like, "Hey, by the way, in case you didn't know." But when, uh, push comes to shove, I could definitely do it. It's just, it's not like it brings me joy and I am, like, the best person to be able to carry out those things.
Right, and everyone should be playing to their strengths. For me, it's kind of like a sandwich. Like I actually I'll I do get really into the details and I'll like remember something from a year ago. Like, oh, we said that like but it's the repetitive tasks middle. So, like, where things need to just, like, happen over and over again, where I'm like, "Can someone else please just, like, make sure this happens?" And to your point, I can do it, like, I can schedule reminders for myself, put it on a calendar, and, like, build a system to make it happen, but it's not where I derive joy. I'm like, I care about I care about the minute detail of this slide and how it looks, and I care about, like, are we leveraging AI to disrupt the people functions?
Right.
Like, we're on the sandwich of the polar end.
Totally, totally, and, like, the things that keep the trains running on time, like, there's people in between that. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, so is there any story speaking of stories, like, story that you can share about and people can remain nameless, and I don't need to know the company or anything like that, but, like, distinct stories that stand out to you of, like, I put that in my memory bank because I want to be like that or don't want to be like that or this action happened or, from a leadership standpoint of like that had an impact on you or the organization, either positively or negatively, that was somewhat simple, but it had a lasting effect on the vibe and culture of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, it goes I have so many stories, it's hard to pick. What I'll say is back to what we said earlier. I think that everyone's leadership style is really unique to them. So even though you can find good models and the good models help shape things you might want to do or not do in your own leadership, I think you have to find something that feels uniquely you, right? I worked for, another leader at Co-Collective, Rosemary Ryan, who truly leads with her heart. Like she's an incredible business thinker, but she is a warm and caring leader. And it always made the organization feel like it was a community, and a deeply caring community. And she's a powerful force of nature leader. So like those two things paired together were really powerful to watch in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
Um,
Was
and I
there anything she did simply on, like, a daily basis, like, any practices that you noticed of her that created that community?
Yeah, I mean, she made it very clear that she cared about you personally, and she still does, by the way, to this day. Like she cared about my husband, she cared about my kids, she cared about me as a person. She she had challenging and challenger expectations of her team and of me, which I deeply appreciated. But it's kind of like the radical candor and like the radical um, uh, and concept, which is when someone delivers difficult feedback or they deeply care about you, it lands very well. And so I think she had the qualities of like directness and the ability to give um direct and clear, like, this is what I want, while you knew that she cared about you as a human being. So that
Yeah.
powerful to me.
Yeah. That is a big deal from a leadership perspective in my mind, right? Because everyone has different things going on at different times, and as much as people say, "I'm gonna separate it," it it's you're one human. Like, it's just like, that is next to impossible. Some people compartmentalize way better than others, but then they're probably not giving their whole self at work, so I would question whether or not you can actually do that, right? I'm not a psychologist, but I've seen it where people are like, "Yeah, I'm leaving that at the door," and I'm like, It's showing up in every meeting." So, I'm not sure how you left it at the door, but, there's breadcrumbs that are following you everywhere around this building. So
Absolutely, and that goes back to self-awareness, right? Like, if you're not in touch with and I think listen, coming back to parenting forces you to really be confronted with this because you're exhausted, you're being stretched, you're being challenged. Some little person, my little person who's 5 years old, telling you that they hate you, and you're like, "Ooh, like, I'm having a reaction to this, but I need to, like, not have a reaction to this." Um So I think that emotional self-management, right? Like, especially when you are going through change, emotional self-management as a leader becomes so important. And that's the difference between like, I do believe it's interesting concepts. Like, for do you bring your whole self to work? And thought a lot about this. I actually wrote a piece on it like during the pandemic where I was like the cool thing about the pandemic is that all of a sudden people became human again. Like you were like you were all
like, the
collectively
cat, like, came across the screen and yeah.
dad and the kid, and like all of a sudden like there was no separation of your work and your life, and it kind of collided in this really powerful way. That all of that said, so I think that's really powerful and true. And I think to deny that, we all are living these really meaningful and important lives and they are intertwined with our work life would be is wrong. It's not right. However, I do believe in in a boundary, like a professional boundary between work and life that is appropriate based on the power you hold in the organization, your influence on other people, and it is my and your responsibility. My responsibility as a leader is to show up emotionally, um, let me say, emotionally what's the word I'm looking for? For now, I'll just say like emotionally ready, like emotionally intelligent, uh, and to lead through change. right? Like, you don't want the pilot saying like, I'm kind of freaked out by the turbulence. Like,
Right. Yes. Mhm. Right. Yeah, yeah, like that level of confidence to say, like, "We can do this without having all the answers," and not necessarily showing, like, all the vulnerable parts. Like, I think there's we could probably do a whole series of a podcast on, like, emotional intelligence and, like, vulnerability and authenticity and performative authenticity and sincerity, and, I mean, all of these terms that are getting thrown around, right? Like, I heard performative authenticity the other day, and it's, like, such a w like, authenticity is being thrown around quite a bit. I know what it means to me, but there is this idea of, like, people are performing that they're their authentic self, and it's insincere, and so it's actually being replaced with this word sincerity, because it's like you and I were talking, right? Like, if you have a bad night, sometimes you don't show up as your best self, and you just have to, like, be sincere in canceling something or changing something around, and that doesn't mean I don't like you or I don't wanna be in your meeting or this project can't move forward. It just means, like, I'm being real with myself and I'm being sincere in my words to say, "Today's not the day."
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. This idea of performing is one that I think it's like worth diving into because I think there is an element of performance required of leadership in the sense that you are on stage, right? Like you are on stage. Your words matter. You if you say something cavalier, that signals back to our original conversation of signal tone and that signal that that's okay in the organization. You are behavior setting in every action. And so the heightened self awareness that you need to have as a leader may require you to self manage more, which is an element, self management is an element of performance. I grew up doing theater, so I don't have an objection to performance. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I like to dress the part, you know? Like, today I'm executive, right? Like, on the weekend, I'm Brooklyn Mall, you know? Like,
Totally, totally, and it comes down to self-awareness and also, like you were saying, like, the power that you have and recognizing that you do have impact and influence on other people, and I think sometimes it's like, well, I'm just Christy. It's like, but you're not just Christy in this environment because people see your title, your influence, who you're interacting and connecting with, and they take something more from that than just you as Christy as the mom of 3 that's running their kids to sports and, can't keep it, has to have somebody grocery shop for her sometimes.
I mean, every time, we'll say that we'll just put it out there, like, it's girl club every time. But that's the thing is, like, I think it is hard. We're all human, and, especially moments where we get overwhelmed and can't handle things. I remember I missed a call, last week when I was so overwhelmed with, like, the kids' travel, and we had no our nanny was out. It was just, like, chaos, and I missed a call, and I rarely ever do. I don't know if I've ever, like, missed a call that I said. I think it was a um, and I was being so hard on myself about it. And I just you you kind of forget, right? Like because you were just experiencing your experience but to other people, to your team, to an organization, especially in a people function, you're a decision maker. You are that influence over things that are important to people. You compensation, you decide their advancement. You cannot forget that. Even if you feel like you are having a tough day and you're just a person, you're just doing your best, like,
Right.
you
Yeah.
you got power whether you like it or not, you know?
Right, 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 or don't be a leader.
Or yeah, or yeah. I mean, that's the other option too, but if you're drawn to the challenge and responsibility of leadership, it can be deeply rewarding. But you can't forget the weight. You just can't forget the weight.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. Um, I had a question to ask you. What was I gonna say? So how do you keep that front and center? Like, what is it let's talk about Kit, right? Like, how do you how do you make sure that you, remember that, whether it's interacting in person or there's this the remote piece of this is so fascinating, interesting to me because people can't feel your energy and always see your behaviors. And most of the time, when people are interacting with you virtually, it's like for a meeting, it's set for a certain time. You get into it. not often do people leave time for just like chit chat, like when you're entering a conference room and people are like interacting as they're walking there or as they're entering the conference room. So, how do you make sure to remind yourself simply, and then keep the energy and vibes in the right direction with your remote team if you have one?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, just a word on, like, hybrid and remote and in-person really quickly. I've long been an advocate of hybrid work, since even before the pandemic and the value that it can bring to organizations, the flexibility it can provide to people who are in different life stages. And I also very firmly believe that there's no replacement for in-person engagement. And, we at Foursquare return to office 3 days a week, in April of 24 now, so almost 2 years ago, which was a challenging transition for us, but really was the right call. And it showed up in the data. We increased cross-functional collaboration in the span of 1 year by 83%. So it's I think that deciding what work modality you want to design for your organization is a deeply strategic choice based on what you're trying to achieve and the unique challenges that you face in the organization. So if you face a challenge like silos or cross-functional collaboration, goodness, there is going to be a benefit to bringing people together. Uh, or if you decide to be fully remote, then, you know, doing really intentional design around in-person gathering, like Dropbox is an incredible example of this. Melanie, who leads the people team over there, has done an amazing job with their kind of virtual first workforce and the way that they very intentionally gather to build relationships. So I think it's really just thoughtful design that is required to make sure that you have the right modality. In some ways, the hardest is when you have a mix, right? You have some people calling in remotely and you have some people in person. Um, Fun fact, actually, we recently, so we're hybrid. We are in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we also have some remote folks, and we're spread across 5 offices. So we actually just moved our company meeting to a remote day so that everyone would all be on screen to increase the consistency of the dynamic. And it took us a while to come to that. That was actually Jenna, my senior director, was the originally one who suggested it, and then we thought we'd give it a try, and we got amazing feedback from doing this for the first time, that finally people could, see each other's faces versus, like, a mishmash of different
Yeah,
offices.
like a room with like a table where it's like the camera's so far away. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about vibe, going back to kind of the premise, I think you also have to talk about the design of how do you put people on equal footing to experience the same like emotional experience with a gathering, right? At Priya Parker's work. Have you read any
Yes,
of
we talked about that, The Art of Gathering, that book. Oh,
Yeah, incredible. But I think what she talks about there is like all of it is about intention. What are you trying to do? Why are you gathering? How do you make that clear to people? And the same is true for working together.
yeah. Yeah. And creating the right physical space together, right? So, like, whether it be on Zoom and there's like less barrier to entry because it's an easy tool and everybody uses it. But I also work with some clients who will set up a Zoom with and then they can't get their audio to work because they don't work in that modality. And so I'm like, Teams is going to be the lower barrier to entry. They know how to navigate it, they know how to use it. So it's like, also, though, all those details matter when you're trying to get people excited about something, and the physical space that they're doing it within.
Yeah. I worked on a client back in my consulting days. I worked on a client project who will remain unnamed, but where we were looking at, it was a very cool project where we were looking at hybrid collaboration and how to improve hybrid collaboration in a global company that was spread across different offices, different modalities. And we ran a series of really cool experiments to learn what would actually move the needle. So I love the idea too, and I learned so much from that piece of work that there's so many different ways to gather, meet, collaborate across time zones, and especially with the technology that we have today. But you have to be intentional about what you choose and what you.
Yeah. 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 So I guess the note here is take a deep breath and pause. I mean, I would love to get into like, I know we're running out of time, but get into like your yoga practice and what that taught you about, teaching and all of that and leading a team, and just taking time to like pause, take a deep breath. I'll tell this to my team all the time. Just take a deep breath. Like it's gonna be okay, and let's really think through this problem versus just doing the thing that we think is in front of us, right? Like, because doing the thing is only it's not gonna progress us to, like, what we need to get to. It's just gonna, like, check the box for 30 minutes until this comes up again.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, like, I know I am so proud of my team because my team now is reminding me that. Like, we I when I started 2.5 years ago, there was a lot of, "Hey, like, let's think about what we're trying to do here. Let's think about the core root problem of what we're trying to solve instead of just actioning on the things we know are on our to-do list." And now I'm moving fast. I'm going and my team will be like, "Okay, can we take a step back and talk about like what we're trying to achieve here, what we're trying to measure?" And I'm like, "Yes." Like that that is, that is amazing to just see that be a part of the behavior that the team is taking.
Yeah. 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 It's because of what you were signaling and the tone you set and the questions you were asking and, like, the vision that you cast. I mean, like we talked about earlier, it's like all of those things, and then those things start to, like, embed themselves within your group.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, language is contagious, right? In the same way that storytelling really defines people's experience. Like language is contagious. You start to use certain language over and over again. That's why slang happens. Language is contagious. If you start to use the same things over and over again, then you start to see those things back. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Okay. So I always end with this too is like, if there's one thing people listening, leaders, founders, small business owners, just parents, I guess, too, because there's so many parallels between parenting and leadership. At least in my experience, and it sounds like in yours too. If there's one thing they could walk away with and go start doing to improve the vibe of their home, their organization, their team themselves, like what is that one thing that they can kind of attach onto and go do now without a budget or a team or all of these things that sometimes feel like a barrier to entry to move the needle forward?
okay, I'll give two, but because one requires a budget. But the budget is if the budget one is if you haven't done therapy, it's worth every penny. I'm serious, like, I talk a lot about, like, doing the work and knowing yourself. Like, you can't build a great team if you don't know your strengths and what comes up for you and why you react or don't react, and you haven't really done the work, like, put in the work. Mm, so I just believe you should do the work. I should believe you should do the work. Um, there's also a lot of great books, about doing the work, and so if you don't have the budget for therapy, then grab a book, um go to the library and do a book, and the third one, which requires no money and not doing anything, is journaling. Um, writing down just the process of writing down, like, what you're feeling and what you're thinking, what's coming up for you is, a self-reflection that I think makes people better leaders.
I think that's great. And even going back to that too, when you get to a certain place in your life where you feel like you have like the capacity to kind of read back, it's a great documentation of how far you've come. And that's important to be reminded of.
Yeah, I was talking about this. I was on a girls' trip this weekend with my 2 best friends, and, we started to have this really deep conversation about how you can't kind of access your any prior emotional states. Like, you could only sorry, it's getting really heady, but I'm just gonna go with that. Like, you you are when you're experiencing something like me at this moment is experiencing you in this conversation through the lens of how I feel today, right? And I can remember intellectually, like, being sad or being really happy in the past, but I can't access that emotional state in this conversation unless I have that emotional state. Um, and so it's really hard to actually, like, fully capture, like, what you were experiencing if you didn't write it down or record it in some way, uh, and to even believe that you have those feelings or you felt that way or
Yeah. Well, and I think that also helps you evolve your emotional intelligence too, right? Because you can look back and say, "Okay, that felt really hard in the moment, but I got through that," right? And it's like giving you the confidence that like I can do hard things. I can do that again. I can go through something like that and I kind of know the tools or the people or what helped me get through it or maybe I don't and I reflect back on it and say, "Hmm, what should I do differently next time?" right? But I think that grows your emotional intelligence significantly.
Yeah. And listen, I think there's a truth. The last thing I'll say is I think there's a truth right now. We are in such a high content consumption moment that people, you have a moment of silence, you fill it by scrolling. Like all of us do it. There's no one who's not doing that. And kudos. If anyone listening out there is not doing that, and you are ahead of the game. And you are incredible and tell me what you're doing. But when you're filling all the silent space, you aren't giving yourself the opportunity to actually process and actually reflect and like do the full circle of reflection, which is like and think about it, think about what you do differently. You're just going into like the mind numbing. And so that takes effort and consciousness to break those habits.
100%. 100%. So just take 5 minutes. If you listen to this, take the next 5 leave yourself some space to take the next 5 minutes and just breathe and think. Without music, without anything, like, be in silence. It's harder than you think.
And don't panic. If
Yeah. Your next phone call is 911 because you're in a state of panic. Well, I really appreciate you being here, for sharing your stories, for sharing your wisdom. So thank you for making the time, despite all the other competing priorities. So I appreciate you.
it's great to talk to you about topics that are close to my heart. So, uh,
Amazing.
thanks for having me.
What a great conversation. I just keep coming back to something Kit said that feels so simple, but actually carries a lot of weight. The vibe or culture is really just the emotional tone of the workplace. And the interesting part is that tone rarely shows up in the big moments. I mean, while it does, it's not as important because what builds to that is the small moments where the tone is set. It's in how leaders respond to a mistake, how curious they are in a meeting, whether they listen or jump straight to answers, even the body language we bring into a room. All of those things are signals. And as Kit pointed out, signaling tends to matter most when it comes from people in positions of power. Whether we mean to or not, people are watching. They're taking cues, they're interpreting what's safe, what's valued, and what behaviors actually get reinforced. One of the things I appreciated in this conversation is the reminder that leadership growth is really a journey of self awareness. Early in our careers, we're often focused on performance, getting results, solving problems, and moving things forward. But as you grow in leadership, the work shifts a bit. You start realizing that how you show up becomes part of the system. Your tone matters, your reactions matter, your language matters, all of those things. Because culture isn't just something leaders talk about, it's something they signal every day. And like Kit said, language is contagious. The tone you set spreads through a team faster than any memo or slide deck ever could. So the takeaway from today is this: pay attention to the signals you're sending, especially the ones you didn't realize you were sending, because that's where the vibe is really being built. So stay curious, stay courageous, and keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.